I am Glenn Tinley with Winnipeg Men and Winnipeg Women magazine. I am here for our quarterly update with our Premier Greg Selinger. Thank you for having us again.
Thank you.
We are both in summer attire.
We are.
It is humidex of 46 today.
Yes, it may well be the hottest day of the year.
I've heard that. The big story yesterday was the company that had an insurance policy against for if it reached a certain amount, and it was 1 degree short. So there's an insurance company out there breathing easy today. But let's get into a couple of things. We're into summer.
Yeah.
We're not making any policy announcements. We're talking to you as our premier, so there's a couple of things that we want to just sort of chat about to get your opinion on. I want to start with the Canadian Wheat Board. Federal government has said we're going to sort of disband the Canadian Wheat Board and let it go to more of a free market,
right?
Which is, as we talked a little bit offline, is a conservative business agenda type of thing to do from a federal standpoint. With Canadian Wheat Board being head office in Winnipeg and a lot of jobs at stake, obviously you're trying to protect them. So you've made a statement about that, but where are we right now with things?
Well, the federal government has, since the majority government been brought in after the last federal election, have made it very clear that they're going to remove the ability of the Wheat Board to be the single desk seller for all the wheat and barley producers in Western Canada. And that has caused a lot of heartburn, particularly for the small and medium-sized farmers who rely on the Wheat Board to do their marketing. The Wheat Board has a tremendous reputation as an international brand, and that will be taken away from them now. They will now be in a situation where they won't have that ability to have all the wheat brought together and then negotiate bulk sales at the best price with cash advances, those types of things. So we think it's going to have a big impact on the rural agricultural community, first and foremost, and put farmers, the smaller, medium-sized ones, in a position where they may not be able to compete against the big guys, and will have to hire and perhaps acquire additional expertise, and so that they can remain competitive, and may be at a competitive disadvantage in terms of where they're at physically, in terms of transportation costs, etc. So it could wind up having a very negative impact on rural communities. That's number one. Number two, head offices in Manitoba, 400 direct employees, a couple of thousand employees indirectly. That's a big impact on Winnipeg. And then thirdly, over 90% of what's shipped through Churchill is product provided by the Wheat Board. So it could have a very significant impact on the only prairie face, which is a deep sea port on the prairies up in Churchill. So those are three very significant issues for us. Impact on farmers, impact on head office, and impact on Churchill. And we felt that they were moving on it so quickly they hadn't considered all of those impacts, and therefore we had to speak up.
Well, and for the small, medium-sized farmer, and my wife comes from a farming family, so who I would consider to be that medium-sized, probably a bit larger, but it almost brings about where you consolidate things, where you may end up with a few really massive players that then start to, maybe the balance starts to get off a little bit?
For sure. I mean, if you have very, very large players that are the only ones that are able to survive in a wide open market, what's the impact on rural communities? Does it make it hard for young farmers to get started? Does it make it hard for small and medium people to stay competitive? If the money's not available to them in their pockets, they're not circulating it through the local community, you start to see the impact on the local businesses. So there could be a very significant negative trickle-down effect if this is not managed properly. And it's important for us to speak up on that. And we've had support from all over the prairies. I mean, there are farmers in Saskatchewan and Alberta that are very supportive of this as well. Their provincial governments have said that they support taking the single desk away from the Wheat Board. We understand that. That's been their historic position. But we have always said that the number one issue is give farmers the decision on whether they want the Wheat Board to have a single desk or not. And so far, farmers in majority, somewhere between 59 and 70%, have said they prefer to keep a single desk Wheat Board. They pay for it. They're the major participants on the board. It seems wrong that they lose their voice in this decision when it's so important to their lifestyle.
Are you able to sort of converse with the federal government?
We have, and we will continue to do that. We've raised our issues. They're aware of them. They seem very committed to following through on it in any event, even though the vast majority of farmers have said that they would like to keep it. There are very loud voices that want to go away from the single desk, but they are not the majority of the voices among producers. So we do hope the federal government will consider that, but so far they've shown an unwillingness to do that.
Well, and it'll be interesting. I'm actually going to follow up on this, but I see some of the specialty crops as well that might suffer a little bit, because although they don't fall under the Canadian Wheat Board, but if everything starts to become one, massive group of companies, possibly some of those lands that are used for some of the specialty crops get sort of swallowed up.
Since we've lost the crow rate, which was a freight subsidy, there's been a lot more specialization in Manitoba and a lot more specialty crops. They tend to do very well, but they have to be very agile to do it,
right.
And they have to have their niche markets. But we've always been a major grower of wheat. We've always been a major grower of barley. It's a product that has a worldwide reputation as being of high value, and the Wheat Board is a brand that has been very attractive for international buyers. They trust the Wheat Board brand, they trust the Wheat Board name, so that's something we don't want to lose.
Yeah, well, it took a long time to get it to that level.
It did.
To say, so all of a sudden sort of see it knocked down might be, tough
and,
to rebuild.
We don't want to lose those jobs in Manitoba either.
Of course. Let's move on to there has been for quite some time talk of expansion of the convention center, and that's sort of underway now, and there's a lot that sort of happened in the past to get us there, and now it seems that it is moving forward.
Right.
Maybe just
I can't make any announcements in this period, but there has been a lot of work done on looking at how to expand the convention center. We've been supportive of that. I believe it's possible. I know they're going to the next steps now of starting to get proposals and to take a look at how it can be done. I'm confident that once all that work is done, that we will find a practical way to expand the convention center, which will be another huge reinvestment in downtown Winnipeg, but in Manitoba generally, because it'll be another way to attract more tourists to Manitoba, more convention trade to Manitoba. It'll help the hotels downtown. It goes along with all the other momentum we have in Winnipeg right now, with the NHL returning, new hotels being built, the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, major housing investments going on in the downtown. So we're getting more people living downtown, we're getting more attractions downtown. Even the Metropolitan Theatre, you've seen recently that was announced. So it just builds the momentum in the Winnipeg economy, which builds momentum in the Manitoba economy, and it allows us to have a very optimistic perspective on the future.
Well, and it's things like that, and we I'll bring up the NHL because it's things like the NHL, and it's been almost surprising in a way of how quickly all the people are paying attention to Winnipeg and Manitoba as a province, that are sort of eyes are being directed here.
That's true.
There's a lot of development, whether it's retail, but downtown is just taken off.
Absolutely.
And that, I mean, the NHL was just sort of the most recent, but obviously a large.
Yeah, there's been a lot of momentum in the downtown. You can go back to the decision to put a Red River campus downtown as being one of the more significant decisions. You can go back to the decision that our government was very supportive of building the MTS Center downtown for the Moose at the time, and as an entertainment venue, which is one of the busiest in North America now. So we've been laying the foundation with our partners in the community, private partners and nonprofit partners and other levels of government, for well over a decade to have a rebirth and a renaissance, not only for downtown Winnipeg, but for Manitoba in terms of the economy. So all of these things are coming together now. They're starting to crystallize, and people are seeing what's going on here, and it's becoming a place that people say, there's good things going on in Manitoba, there's good things going on in Winnipeg. It's attracting investors. It's attracting people that want to live here. It's making Winnipeg a more exciting place to be, and that's all a good story.
Well, and I actually had a conversation yesterday with a land developer who said he was actually quite impressed and happy to see this, that with the IKEA development, IKEA is a major shareholder actually in the entire development.
Right.
So that is private investment being made in the province.
Right.
And so sometimes, and I've said this myself, sometimes you look around and you think, gosh, the government is doing a lot, but you need private investment because you need new money coming in.
Absolutely.
And that's a positive thing.
It's very rare that we do anything 100% with government dollars except schools and healthcare. But all of these other projects are really partnerships between the private sector, sometimes offshore investors or out-of-province investors. IKEA is a good example of that. Centreport's another good example. We're building the infrastructure there, but it's attracting very significant private sector interest, including from out of town. So all of these things are building a critical mass to reinvent the province as a transportation hub, as a retail hub, as an entertainment hub, as a place to live and raise a family. And one of the most significant things we're doing for Winnipeg is incenting more housing in the downtown area.
Yeah.
It's not as high profile because it's several small projects, but when you've got an extra 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people living downtown, that just brings a whole bunch of vitality back to the community.
Well, and I am lucky enough that, or somewhat maybe unlucky, but I travel to some larger cities. And I was just in Hong Kong last week, and on a different scale, but everything is up.
Yes.
But when you stand on the street and walk around and you just see the amount of traffic and the amount of people and the amount of buzz and the retail and the shops and everything moving around, that's starting to sort of, or will start to happen.
Yeah,
when you
can see that now. Even with the Fringe Festival on right now, the downtown is filled with people fringing.
I saw lineups last night when I was driving home.
That's great.
Yeah.
You go over to the University of Winnipeg now, where we've just about doubled the footprint of that.
Yeah.
And a downtown university is fundamental to a healthy, vibrant downtown. And the University of Winnipeg, the new Richardson Center for the Environment and Sciences, our commitment to build a new field house over there, the expansion of the student residence, the new Buehler Center where the business school and the plug-in art gallery is. These are all making a huge difference on the image of the downtown and bringing more people down here. So the momentum builds on itself.
Yeah.
It becomes a bit like a waterfall. The more things that are going on, the more people want to do things, and that momentum is accelerating and continuing to move us in the right direction.
Okay, and that's all good because I've said for a long time, Winnipeg, Manitoba has this sort of inferiority complex, and I think finally we're starting to get over it.
Absolutely. Even on architecture alone, you take a look at some of the architecture here. We have some of the most interesting and innovative architecture in the world going on right here. The Globe and Mail's recognize that.
Yeah.
The new Hydro building, for example, some of the state-of-the-art technology for green buildings. All of our government buildings now have to be green buildings.
Yeah.
The lead concept of how we design a building with the participation of the users of the building to get the footprint, the carbon footprint as small as possible.
Right.
That creates innovation. Some of those ideas then can travel the rest of the world. Some of those concepts that have been developed here can then travel the rest of the world. So the more we are innovative, not only in architecture, but on the economy and how we reinvent ourselves, the more excitement that builds and the more confidence we'll have in ourselves, and the more we can export these ideas to other places.
Yeah, no, and that's a good thing. I think that inferiority complex is starting to move in the right direction, and I also think we've got a core group. We do some work with the Asper School of Business, and I see the graduates that are coming out of there in the last 4 or 5 years that are staying here and are now they're in that 30 to 35, 36, 37-year-old, and they're starting to make impact in management positions.
They want to be here.
And they want to be here, and they want a vibrant city. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
Finally, we're sort of at the tail end of the flood of many centuries.
Right.
So, again, when I'm thinking about this, what we were going to talk about last night, it's sort of the cost of the flood has been
Huge.
exponentially huge.
Yeah.
How does the cost of that sort of impact some of the other things that the government wants to do?
It's a good question. First of all, the way Manitobans have responded to the flood has been exceptional. We have fought the flood everywhere from the Paw down to Brandon to the Souris Valley, into Winnipeg, up through the Interlake. And every step of the way, Manitobans at the local level, with the support of the other levels of government, have mounted a tremendous effort and have really reduced harm as much as possible to people. I mean, we have done a really terrific job. The challenge still isn't over. We still have some very high water on some of our key lakes in Manitoba. We're going to have to continue to be vigilant and do things to protect people. But the reality is it has cost a lot of money. There will be a certain recovery under the Disaster Financial Assistance Program with the federal government. That will help significantly. But we have had to switch our priorities to put resources into it because it's a real issue that has to be addressed right now. What will be the long-term impact? I think there will be some good innovations that come out of it.
Okay,
because some of the technologies we've used have never been done before. Aquadams, HESCO barriers, some of the ways we've responded to it have shown an unprecedented capacity for organization. So I think there'll be some very good things that come out of it, even though you don't see them right now because we're still fighting it and the water's still very high on some of our lakes. But the financial impact will have a 1-year impact, which we will have to absorb. And we'll get a certain recovery from the federal government, and the rest we'll have to absorb ourselves. It will probably require us to slow down on some of our other capital spending projects. But it should be manageable.
Yeah.
And most of those projects, we have 5-year plans now, for example, on some of our major capital investments. We may have to tweak things for a year.
Yeah.
And take an extra year to do some projects. Because we do have a responsibility to manage our house properly.
Right.
But the reality is a lot of those investments, which were short-term emergency measures, will also provide long-term benefits and security for some of those communities. A lot of those dikes are going to be made permanent.
Right.
And that'll provide permanent protection. And we have an economic recovery program as well. So the whole trick when you go through a shock like that is to develop a response that allows you to bounce back as quickly as possible. And when you do that, you can actually come out of it with stronger communities because they've done a tremendous effort of working together. For example, some of the communities I've been in, the ability for people to come together and respond to that has shown that they can do other things. And they will take that sort of organizational capacity that they've developed it, and they'll apply it to the economic recovery. And hopefully they'll recover as quick as possible. And we'll help them do that with some of the grants we're going to make available.
Well, and as much as also the fact that if with growth in the province,
Yes.
will provide more tax revenue, because I mean ultimately there's sort of that one source of income that the province has to deal with, and there's only so much to go around.
No, there will be, I mean, there is a lot of expenditure. It does provide short-term stimulus to the economy. It'll provide some long-term protections to some of those communities. We'll have the ability to show that we are good at organizing and working together to get things done. But let's not kid ourselves. There's been a lot of suffering too. There's been a lot of people that have been pushed out of their homes. Some people have been pushed out of their cottages. Some of the businesses have taken a real hit because of the decline in tourist activity. Yeah. So there's lots of rebuilding to do and lots of recovery to do. But we have put a lot of resources in place to deal with that. And we're going to work hand in hand with our local communities to recover as quickly as possible.
Okay, well, we look forward to sort of following that along and seeing where that all ends up, because it has been I mean, the water is still, although you can see it really dropping now, it's been just unbelievably high, and it's July the 18th. I mean, summer's halfway done.
Yeah, it's been the largest flood with the longest duration that we've seen in our lifetimes, and probably in the last 100 years. So it's been a major challenge, but I actually think Manitobans have responded to it as well as or better than anywhere else in the world.
Let's just hope that next year the water could stay down a little bit.
Exactly.
So, okay, thank you very much.
Glenn.
And we look forward to speaking with you again, hopefully maybe in September-ish, once the summer is over and things are back. I know you'll be in full election mode by then, but hopefully we'll get a chance to have a sit down. So I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Glenn.
I am Glenn Tinley with Winnipeg Men and Winnipeg Women magazine, signing off for the summer of 2011 with our Premier Greg Selinger.